you have started work, you have looked into literature to learn further how you can use assessment in the teaching and learning process. In our last session, we talked about how we can integrate assessment into our teaching and learning. We also discussed about how we can use evidence, collect evidence in the process of teaching so as to inform our next instruction. In our last session, we looked at three very important questions. Where am I going? Where am I now? How can I close a learning gap? And we also see that this is closely aligned to the four critical questions in PLC. What do we want our students to learn? And how will we know that they are learning? And if they are learning, how will we respond when they don't learn? And that is where we see we need to have the evidence to move the learning forward. And we also look at how will we respond when we do learn. So these three guiding questions incorporating assessment in our lesson are very closely aligned with the four critical questions in PLC. For today, we are going to look at peer assessment. In peer assessment, we are going to look at how we can use students as learning resources for one another. And assessment basically is the assessment of student work by other students. And it refers to students' critical evaluation of peers' performance. Whether it is in writing or in oral presentations, students will know what to look out for in this so as to give their classmates feedback on what have they done right or what can they do to move the learning forward. So really, it's actually helping students to evaluate their own learning and in interpreting assessment criteria. We really need to help the student to see what is the learning outcome. Therefore, this learning outcome needs to be fully understood and shared with the students. There is clarity of the learning outcome by the teacher as well as the student. Teacher also need to model the process of how to give feedback to their classmates. And in the process, the quality also need to be monitored. In other words, peer assessment is a bridge between teacher assessment and the student's self-assessment. If peer assessment is done correctly, students will become more confident and self-directed learners, as opposed to teacher giving the feedback alone. When I was teaching, I used a lot of peer assessment in my classroom. And some of the benefits I found from my own practice of using peer assessment are it really improved the motivation of pupils to work more carefully. Later I will show you some example on this. And in the process of giving each other feedback, children's mathematical communication improved, and therefore it strengthens students' voice and improves communication between students and their teacher about what they are learning. And children are given the opportunity to take on the role as teacher. In our last session, we talked about the key sub-considerations for quality classroom assessment. So before we design the lesson, and even before we implement the lesson, we need to have clear purpose, clear targets, good design, communication, how this learning is communicated. And for today's specifically, we are looking at how we can use students to communicate the learning to one another. And in the process, our students are involved in tracking their learning. It's not only teacher. Students are involved to understand learning targets as well as to provide feedback to their peers to move the learning forward. Quick recap on what is learning target. Learning target basically a student-friendly description of what they need to learn or accomplish in a given lesson. And there are three types of learning target: knowledge, reasoning, product, or performance. So in our lesson design, we need to consider for this particular lesson, what is the learning target that we are focusing on? Is it a knowledge, or is it a reasoning, or is it both?